From now on, we will study about the second sort of an adverb, that is the past participle. The past participle as an adverb describes the subject-object relationship to focus on the latter part of the interaction with the subject from the perspective of the object indirectly described by the past participle. The past participle with the trait as an adverb applied in a clause stated in the perfect tense describes the definition of the intransitive verb have or has that describes the subject. So we can understand that the past participle indirectly describes the subject of the clause as the time receiver. The subject of the clause is the object in the relationship between the period and the subject of the clause. So we can understand that the object described by the past participle is receiving the definition of the verb as the body of the past participle. The past participle in the clause stated in the perfect tense to describe the experience of the subject describes the subject to respond to a period when the experience of the subject lasts. The speaker can summarize the experience of the subject during a period with the clause stated in the perfect tense. So the completion of the experience is actualized by the speaker who declares the completion of the experience. The completion of the experience can be at the present when the speaker states the clause. In this clause, the form of the intransitive verb have or has reveals the occurrence between the point in time when the experience of the subject is completed by Jesus Christ and the point in the present when the speaker and the listeners have a conversation. To state the clause, the form of the intransitive verb had reveals that there is a time gap between the point in the past when the speaker declared the completion of the experience in the past and the point in the present when the speaker and the listeners have a conversation to state the clause about the experience that was declared into the completion. The form of the intransitive verb had described by the past participle with the trait as an adverb reveals that the clause is stated in the past perfect tense. The speaker who is going to declare the completion of the experience in the future applies the modal verb will to describe the intransitive verb have that describes the subject retaining the experience. So that the speaker reveals that the experience of the subject will last until a point in the future, and the application of the modal verb will to describe the intransitive verb have reveals that there is a time gap when the speaker states the clause at the present and the point in the future when the speaker is going to declare the completion of the experience of the subject in the clause. We can say that the clause is stated in the future perfect tense. Thus, the speaker to state a clause in the perfect tense considers the past participle to specify the relationship between the subject who has a period as an object. The period is not indicated in the clause because the period is the premise for the existence of the subject. The subject of the intransitive verb have is considered as a time receiver in the relationship between the period and the subject. The form of the past participle reveals that the subject of the clause is the time receiver. The subject of the clause starts and gives the definition of the verb, that is the body of the past participle, initiatively during the period, to the object. From the second, transitivity. As the subject of the clause receives the period, the past participle as an adverb reveals this fact that the subject of the clause receives the period for the experience. The definition of the verb, that is the body of the past participle, is actively actualized by the subject of the clause. According to the transitivity of the verb, that is the body of the past participle, there can be an object to receive the definition of the verb, that is the body of the past participle. From the second, transitivity of the past participle. In a case that the verb is the transitive verb, the past participle that was transformed from the transitive verb keeps the transitivity to deliver the definition of the transitive verb to an object. There is a clause, she has swum. This clause reveals how the experience of the subject, she, has been until the present when the speaker declares the completion of the experience with the action described by the intransitive verb swim, that is the verb form of the past participle swam. This clause describes the experience that the subject, who is a female and not a participant in the conversation, has from the point in the past when the speaker considers that the experience of the subject started to the point at the present when the speaker declares the completion of the experience that the subject has. The form of the past participle swam applied as an adverb to specify the definition of the intransitive verb has, so that the speaker can specify how the experience of the subject, she, lasts until the present. The speaker who declares the completion of the experience at the present reveals that the subject has a period. This period can be the object of the intransitive verb has. But the speaker and the listeners understand the abbreviation of the object, that is a period, as a premise to discuss about the experience of the subject. During this period, the subject actualized or actualizes the action described by the intransitive verb swim more than once. We can say this as an experience, and the form of the past participle swam reveals that the subject she receives the period, and the subject who receives the period actualizes the action described by the intransitive verb swim actively as the subject of the definition delivered by the intransitive verb swim during the period for the experience more than once. The reason why the speaker who states a clause in the perfect tense describes that the subject has the experience with the intransitive verb has is that the speaker retains the experience until the speaker declares the completion of the experience. We can think of the procedure that the experience is made. At each point when we actualizes the action described by the intransitive verb swim during the period, we can gather the experiences during the period, and we retain the experiences until the point at the present when the speaker declares the completion of the experience. The subject of the intransitive verb to describe the experience that the subject retains is a female who is not a participant in the conversation with the speaker, indicated by the personal pronoun she, and the object is a period that is abbreviated, that the experience of the subject lasts, but the period is not indicated in the clause. The speaker describes the experience of the subject with a way to actualize an action indicated by the past participle swam that originated from the intransitive verb swim more than once during for the period that the experience lasts. Without the indication in the clause, there is the primary agreement that every experience, condition, or action of the subject actualizes on the premise that the time goes. The experience, condition, or action of a subject described by the intransitive verb also actualizes on the premise that the time goes. The past participle that originated from the intransitive verb is applied in the perfect tense. There is a clause, he has seat. The past participle seat that originated from the intransitive verb seat indicates the way that the subject influenced from the period responds to the period that is not indicated in the clause. The listeners are aware that the object of the verb has is a period, and the period is abbreviated. And the speaker and listeners understand that the period as the fundamental principle for the speaker and the listeners to discuss about the experience of the subject at the present. So the intransitive verb sit is applied in the form of the past participle sit with the first transitivity. The first transitivity reveals that the form of the past participle sit connotes that the subject of the clause is the time receiver, the period receiver for the experience. Thank you for watching.